All right. Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm the audio and visual expert.
My name's Kai. I did all of the code in this project.
Hi, my name is Nardis. I was in charge of planning, debugging, and testing the game.
Cool. All right. So this is our code at the moment. It's pretty long, about 500 and something lines of code between all four of the tabs. And we'll just run it. The controls of this game are W, A, S, D for movement, space to shoot primary weapon, shift to shoot secondary weapon. Enjoy. Welcome to the space simulation. Press backspace to stop simulation. Alright. So yeah. And if we press backspace, and that's the end of the game. But yeah, so how I did the visuals, there's an online program that you can create, it's like Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator all in one. It's free, called Vector, VECTR.com. It's a pretty cool program. You can save it as a PNG or an SVG, which is it's just a vector file. How I did the audio, I used Audacity and just recorded my voice, and then used different effects on the recording itself to get the laser sound, the engine sound of the spaceship, the secondary fire, and what else do I do? The beginning intro and everything. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Kai, you want to talk about how the code works? I'll scroll through.
So you didn't really cover the game mechanics or anything too much, but essentially the point of the game is just to get a high score. If you shoot an asteroid, you get 100 points. If you get hit by an asteroid or by your own shots, then you lose 200 points. You can go for as long as you want. You won't die, but you can get negative points if you keep screwing up so badly. Essentially, I don't know how I'm going to cover this. If you just want to like slowly scroll, like I've just got a bunch of variables up the top, such as the images and the audio, the instances for the classes. So essentially just all the different objects, all of the scoring and level related stuff. And then timing for like, if I needed to time shit, such as, I don't know, like you can only shoot every like half a second or something like that. The game's set up to be 1280p by 720, because that's just easy to work with. Imported all the images, imported sounds, created an array list to hold all of the objects. So I use that so I could loop through the list and call all the functions for each object. I created a new player, which is, it's an entity class if you just want to go to the entity tab up the top. So all of the entities, which would be the projectiles, the asteroids, and the player, kind of came from this class. They all have an image, a health, a damage, a speed, radius, position, direction, and velocity. Yep, up there. And so I used all of that information to essentially, run the game. If you go to the player tab up top, so the player's the same essentially, except it's got a bit like bonus extra features such as input, the two different types of projectiles, and then information that goes with those, such as their timing. And then there was a tiny bit of animation on the player that's not too noticeable, but yeah, and just a few other variables like that. Go back to the main one, I guess, for now. Where are we at? So yeah, so essentially in the setting up the player and the animation image for that player, increment the level, start the music, it's pretty straightforward. And then from there, if you go down, the next function's increment level, and it just spawns in 15 asteroids every time. So it just creates a new entity class, sets its image, sets its speed to be something random and its radius, and then adds it in. The small asteroids are faster but smaller, and then the large asteroids are slower but bigger, and then the medium are like mixed in between. In the draw function, it's where I updated my time variables for timing and shit, and essentially I used the millisecond inbuilt function for processing. That just gives how many milliseconds since the game started, and I kind of calculated, well, how many milliseconds past last like frame, and how many milliseconds are we up to now, and then I can calculate, well, how much time has changed per frame. Drew the scene up with standard background stuff, whatever, and then I have the game intro kind of section here. So essentially what this does is, if the game hasn't started and you haven't skipped the intro, then it's not going to draw the rest of the screen. It's going to return, which is like down the bottom of that function, or the if statement there. And essentially it just plays through the audio, waits till it's finished, and then plays the next audio there too. But yeah, that runs through. Once that's done, the game has started officially. And then there's a game over kind of pause. If you've already lost, or if you've decided to stop, then it won't draw the rest of the screen. And assuming, if we keep going, that you have started and you haven't finished, then that's where we draw the draw the objects, move them, and check their collisions by calling their update function. And if you go to like the entity tab up there, I just realized it's quite a bit. So you can see the update function just under the constructor there, where your mouse is, and it calls the draw and move function for each entity. In the draw function, it's just like, at their position, draw the image and then rotate it based on the heading of the direction. And then for the move function, it's just adding the velocity to the position. And then for that second half of the move function is where I do all of the boundary loops and stuff. And just under that, there's an on collision function. We'll see that later. Not all of it, just the on collision, whatever. There's an on collision function, and essentially that runs every time an entity hits another entity. All of those other functions are just for setting variables. Go back to main. Where are we at? So, yep. So update the player. I have a function called update entities, which is essentially looping through all of the entities of the asteroid array list and then updating them. And then same for the projectiles array list. It then runs a check collision function, which is a bit further down, I'll get into. It then draws the GUI, which is the score up in the top left. And then it levels up if the asteroid size is 0. So there are no asteroids, which essentially just increases the level. There's another function here. Next function is stop. That just runs when the program exits, and it just closes all of the audio so it doesn't keep running in the background. The function after that is draw GUI. That just draws the score at the top left. Function after that is the draw the end screen. So if the game's over, this function run, and that just displays your score in the center. The function after that is where it gets a bit more complicated for the collisions. Is essentially it loops through all of the asteroids. So just like you see the for loop. Keep going down. Yep, there. So that first for loop loops through all of the asteroids, and for every asteroid there is, it goes ahead and loops through all of the projectiles. So then it checks for the first asteroid, it will check if that asteroid has hit any of the projectiles, and then for the second asteroid, any of the projectiles. It also checks if the asteroid has hit the player. If you want to just like highlight, go up a bit, highlight, what is it, line 230. So that's one of the that calls another function I have going, which checks the collision between my first entity, the asteroid, the second entity, the player, and then if that collision happened, it applies a score, which is -200 if the player hits an asteroid. If you go down a bit to like kind of the third for loop, keep going. Yep, that one. So that one, same thing. It just loops through the projectiles, but then it doesn't loop through the asteroids again because the asteroids have already been checked. But it loops through to see if any projectiles have hit the player, and then loops through the projectiles again, and that's like every other projectile. So it kind of checks if the projectiles hit each other. Keep going a bit further down. So after all those collisions are kind of checked, it checks, well, it loops through all of the entities again, says, does any of them have a health that's less than or equal to 0? And they die, then they get destroyed, pretty much. So it's like that post-collision health check on line 256 from, that part. So after this, it's the check collision function. So that last one was kind of like looping through everything, and then when it looped through a set of objects, it would call this function, and this is the actual collision check, which just checks how far should they be away from each other, which is their radius variable in each entity. How far are they from each other, of course, the distance inbuilt function, and it just checks how far they are from their positions. And then it's like, well, if they are less than their collision radiuses would allow, then it pretty much changes the score. So it updates whatever score you put in. It will then call the onCollision function, which I mentioned before, the entity file for both entities. And the parameter for that is the entity that it collided with. So if you want to highlight 279. Yep. So for example, entity A, which might be an asteroid, collides with, and then in the parameter I put entity B, which might be the player. So then the asteroid, so it's essentially, if you want to go to the entity top, and then that onCollision function right there, it just says, well, the other object I hit, take their health and take away how much ever damage I deal, essentially. Anyway, it's just whatever. It's just there. I could have done it a different way. It just deals damage to both entities, essentially. If you want to go back to the other one, keep scrolling. There's just input. Input's kind of a more of a complicated thing because if you hold it down, I've got to keep the input going. I had an error with that, but I won't go into that right now. I may cover it later. But essentially, it calls an update input function on the player script. And then it also checks for if you click backspace during the introduction. And then if you click space, if you click space, that skips the introduction. And if you click backspace and you're not in the introduction, so the game has started, then that triggers game over. With the key release, it's the same thing. It just updates the input, the key or the key code to equal false. You want to go to the player script, Jacob? Thank you. It's down the bottom. Yeah, okay. So it's line 152. So essentially all of the update input function does, it's kind of goes through. Oh wait, shit! Oh no, I've got to explain how I've done this. Okay, no, go to the input tab up the top. Okay, so this is a custom class that I'm using just to store the inputs in. So it has freaking code or a character or both, and then a value for that. So if you go to the player tab again and go right up the top. So what I've done is I've created a hash map of string to input, the second line. And I've just called that my inputs. And then in the constructor, which is round line 17, where you've got like your mouse at right now, I've just essentially put in the string forward and then assign that to a new input, which is the class we were just looking at. And then essentially I put the W key in for up, I put S for down or whatever. I don't really want to go into explaining it. If you understand, then that's good enough. And essentially, I'm looping through all my different. I'm checking, well, has the person clicked the W key or maybe the space key or the shift key? And if they have, then change the value for that input to be true. And then you can access that value by the keyword forward, backward, left, right, shoot A or shoot B. It's I'm not going to really go into it. It's kind of a complicated process, but kind of not. I don't know. Essentially, scroll down a bit to the move function. Yeah, just there. Essentially, I wrote a function get input. If that just returns the value. If the input's true, then it will do whatever. But the forward, it updates the speed, animates the image for the what do you call it, thruster, I guess. It then plays the ship moving sound, the engine sound, and then it checks, well, has the audio finished, and then it just loops it again, essentially. And if you're not moving forward, the else part of the function, no, sorry, the if statement, then it just sets the image back to the default non-thruster, non-animated image, and then pauses the audio. For the backward, the right, and the left, it just sets the speed and rotates the direction accordingly. And then scroll down a bit more. And then the shooting mechanics, get input, shoot A. So if you've clicked the shoot button and you have a timer before you have time before your shot, you have time to shoot. I don't know. Yeah, there's like a delay between shot, so you can't spam. Then it just creates a new projectile based on a template, which I set up in the constructor, which I kind of skipped over, but don't bother about it. Sets the position to the player's position plus a bit ahead of the player, and then updates the direction so the bullet's facing the same direction as the player, and then it adds it to the list, the array list, of projectiles. So then it back in the draw function, it'll get updated, and then plays the shoot audio, which is pretty cool. My good friend Jacob made. Same thing for shoot B, the secondary one, but the template's different so that the bullet is slower and it has more health, so it can break through 3 to 5 different asteroids or whatever. Then just a bit further down past that big chunk of code there, that was all the secondary. Then you've got the timers that get updated by delta time. So pretty much the time that passed between frames, that's how much the timer changes by. And then it calls the super.move, which is essentially just the parent class's move function, which is the default add velocity to position and then check the boundaries and whatever. There's a function to animate the image, which is just looping through an array essentially, and then every certain frames or whatever, it will change based on a timer. I've got the 2 update input functions just below that. The one for what do you call them? Key codes, so stuff like backspace and whatever, and then one for characters, so normal letters and stuff. And then there's just a get input function, which returns the value for whatever input you wanted from the array that I created. I want to head back to the main section. God, I just realized I'm not sure how much of this, so I'll just cover all of it, I guess.
Yeah, just cover all of it. It'll be fine.
So where were we at? We were at the input, right? So just past that, the update entities, that's simple. I mentioned it just loops through all of the entities of a given array list and then updates them. Past that, I've got an audio function which just plays it and then rewinds it when it's done, which is required for the plugin library. I don't think I mentioned libraries. I've got a Java library for the hash map I used in the player, which just adds a bit more extra functionality. Not really important. And then I also got the Minim. Is that Minim? Minim library for audio. So that's what enabled me to play all the sounds and stuff essentially. So there's play audio on a loop, which is a function I don't think I have actually ever used. I had it, but whatever, I'll clear it out later. The code right now, the game's done. It's just cleaning up and commenting stuff right now. It's still a bit to go. Get delta time just returns the time, and then get asteroid image, which returns a random image when I spawn the asteroids in. I do believe that is all the code. So just again, just play the game, trying to get a high score. If you get hit, you lose points. If you get a point, destroy an asteroid, you get a point. And essentially, that is all I contributed to. So I'll pass it on to Natus to talk about how he masterfully executed his role. Natus. I think he left. Oh,
No, I
Wow.
just had myself muted while you're doing your thing.
sorry. Yeah, well, so Natus, go ahead.
I was in head of planning. We had multiple revisions of what we wanted to make. First, we were going to try to make our own version of asteroids that was like the original with different levels and all that. But we eventually, after multiple ideas of having bonus levels in the program, so for example, instead of having that, we're going to have lives instead of just getting negative points when you get hit by something. We started going through this like having a bonus level where UFOs would come, but we figured out that that would just mess around with the new style of the code that we did, that we were making. Just having the basic blocks of a game that you could just spend your time with, just messing around, playing, having fun while you've just like you're in the middle of studying or something and you just want to bust out a game, just play it for a second while you're thinking on an idea and then just go straight into it. The other thing is that I was doing bug testing, and one of the bugs was if you clicked, I think Kai went over this in the code, that when you clicked backspace, accidentally, if you clicked backspace while you were launching up the game while it was going through the narration, and then you clicked space, the game would already be over with 0 points. That was one of the bugs. The other thing is that we've been going through with the time management with it. We did not have a great time management when we were doing this. We kept getting distracted during sessions that we were together. But over that, we've made our own version of asteroids that I think we're happy with at the moment.
If you don't mind, I'll just cut in there another
Yep.
time. So with the code, I kind of explained how it worked, but I didn't go into like problems counted and stuff. There was quite a few problems, too many to count. But some of the notable ones were often no, you can keep playing if you want. I'm not gonna go into it because I'm not gonna show it in the code because I got rid of the bugs obviously.
Yeah.
But I implemented a pixel-based collision system, so you'd collide on the pixel instead of on like the radius of the object, which you can't really see, but it's there. And that turned out to be very slow, checking like most pixels on the screen every frame, and it just wasn't good to keep in the game. And another problem I often encountered was what's called Java pass by reference versus pass by value. Essentially, everything's kind of passed by reference, objects are, so classes and stuff. And what this meant was if I like create a bullet, this was one of the issues. I created a bullet and then I kind of set its position in front of the player. And then that's like, so I can shoot it away from the player, obviously. But then if I move the player, the bullet will follow and it will keep following. And then if I change the speed of the bullet, that will change the speed of the player as well. And it's kind of links them together, which was a bit of a pain to overcome. Those were two of the bigger problems. Of somebody else wants to talk about some of the problems they encountered.
one of the problems we had early in development of it was that we had the asteroids only being able to spawn in one place for a while before we fixed it, where they would spawn on one of the X things, and when you hit them, it would destroy them completely. We went back in the code and figured out, I think it was one of the asteroids just made itself again once it was hit, so it would lose a life and it would make itself right back in the same position instead of spawning another one. That's one of the reasons we went to a level system like this, because all the asteroids spawn at once, and when they're gone, they all spawn again in a different order randomly, making it much easier for the player.
Jacob, did you run into any issues doing the sounding or any applications?
Not really. Basically, it was just how to actually produce the audio and the visuals. I had to really think of how did the original Asteroids games sound like, and the laser sound and the explosion sound and all that. Since it's our own version of Asteroids, it was quite, good that I can change some things, have different things and all that. It wasn't too bad. I can't. Yeah. So.
Yeah, okay. But one of the things, like Jacob was the sound director, but me doing the code, I often requested things I wanted him to make for me, and then we went through a few different iterations and stuff. Like at first, the asteroids were hollow, but then it kind of glitched out because the outlines were like only a few pixels thick, and when it was moving around really fast, it was just like it couldn't render enough or whatever. And we went through some iterations, but then we kind of got to a consistent design, which was pretty cool in the end. Of the sound effects kind of futuristic, and then the looks pretty good, I do say so myself.
Cool. Yeah.
Agreed.
Alrighty. Well, I might play the game one more time, and with the audio and everything, and then we'll wrap the video up. So let me hit it. The controls of this game are WASD for movement, space to shoot primary weapon, shift to shoot secondary weapon. Enjoy. Welcome to the space simulation. Press backspace to stop simulation. Cool. So thank you for chilling with us, guys. I appreciate ya. Hope you enjoyed our video and our game, and good luck to all of you else. All right, bye.